everyone, I'm Rochelle and I am showing you use cases of how I've set up my custom OpenClaw and what it does for me. So for today, I want to show you Kate and some of the things that Kate does for me. So Kate is my household manager, and one of the things she does is help me out with managing my budget. And this was a process for me to figure out with Kate. We worked through some iterations on this. Now, to give you historical context, I used to run this this has been like years in the making. I used to run this, excuse me, through Google Sheets. Then I ran this through Airtable. Now I run this through my version of OpenClaw. So I have some historical context of what I've done before, what I wanted to do, and how I wanted it to work. But really, I don't want to pay for tools because I'm a trash panda, right? I don't like paying for things. I like doing things customized in my way. And so really, I want to do this as cheap as possible. So when I set up Kate and managing my money, one of how I used to do it is I used to have email notifications that came in anytime I had a spend. So either through my bank account, a credit card, or anything, I would get an email notification of a spend. And that would get flagged with a label in my email, and then that would trigger a script, and that would send it to Airtable. And then there'd be AI calls within Airtable to pull out the transaction, the merchant, the date, all the things. And then I would go in and I would categorize it. And that way it fit into my budget. Lots of stuff, lots of places that things could go wrong. And it did go wrong. Like sometimes the emails didn't fire. I always had to reconcile at the end of the month. And it was the manual categorization and stuff and things that happen every single month. Like I know that I pay my internet bill every single month. But I would still have to categorize it every single month. And from my bank, it didn't say the merchant in the email. So I would have to know what it was and all this stuff. It was just it was clunky. It worked, but it was clunky. And so when I was designing this, I was like, how could I do this better? What's going to make my life easier? Because that's really how I'm looking at OpenClaw in general is how can I do this better? What mental tabs can I close in my mind to make my life easier? That's really how I'm designing this. So the mental tabs that I'm closing, budgeting, right? Auto categorizing transactions. And so what I did is I used a tool called SimpleFin. And Cursor is the one who told me about it. Shocking. And SimpleFin is a read-only API to my accounts. And you set it up, think of it like Plaid or You Need a Budget or something like that, where it's a read-only API call to my accounts. And I authorize like what accounts it has access to. It's able to pull in pending and posted transactions, what merchant, what date it was spent, and the amount. And so we can pull in all of that data. Now, it can't write anything, it can't change anything, it's read-only access to that data. So it's gonna, at whatever time I call that API, it's gonna go grab that data and it's gonna give it to me. That's it. Now, that cost is 15 bucks a year. That's all it costs, or like $1.50 a month. Okay, 15 bucks a year. That's not bad. Okay, I can handle 15 bucks a year. Now I got to do something with it. So the way I set up Kate, this is where I was using LLMs to do it, and it was just not worth it. Remember when I said like, is it worth it to use an LLM, or is this just basic scripting? Okay, is this just basic coding? This is where basic coding became my friend, because what it does is it has access to all my transaction history. Okay, all my transaction history is in the table, and so at 4 times a day. And I could speed it up, but I don't. 4 times a day, it will call this SimpleFin API and it will pull in any pending or posted transactions. And it will look at my transaction data and say, do we already have them? And if we already have it, cool. Are they pending or are they posted? And it will like tell me one or the other. And it'll link them together if they go from pending to posted. And it will just put them on my transaction table. Then it will use regex or pattern matching to look at all of my transaction history and see, do we have patterns where we know what this transaction was? So if you've watched other videos, you've seen like I'd identified Strang Hall as eating out. Well, I don't know for sure. I'd have to dive in. Did it see Strang Hall previously that that was eating out? Or it has the option if it can't figure it out, it has a tool the LLM can access to go search the internet to see what Strang Hall is and then determine it's a restaurant and eating out and categorize it as eating out. And so there's different levels. So it's like, can we look at pattern matching and just match it? Do we know? Do we need to research and can we figure it out? And then can we categorize it? And then if all else fails, if we can't figure it out, we just mark it as uncategorized and Rochelle will come in and she'll do it. And so it will categorize all of my transactions for me, and then I just have to review. Mental lift off my radar, and then I just have to look at it in my dashboard. So there, and that Kate will notify me if there's anything she can't categorize. Otherwise, it just happens. It just happens in the background. I don't even know about it. It just goes and happens unless I go into my budget and unless I take care of it. So this is something that I look at. So on my dashboard, okay, so on my desktop or on my Discord, I have a couple different things here to show you. So she has a couple of proposals in here that Rivet decided no. So there's a couple of things in here, but this is where I talked to Kate about money. You can see that she has every morning she has a cron job that says, look at the spending from yesterday and tell me like how did I do? So what she'll do that. She will look for uncategorized transactions, etc. She can do all of that in here, and she'll communicate with me about money here. Now, if I go to my database, I'm sorry, not my database, my UI. I can see Kate here. I can go to Kate Money, and Kate Money is really, really cheap. Like you can tell right now, she is 1 cent. That's so 1 penny a day. I can handle that. So you can see here with she does a daily spending summary. This is an LLM call. She takes all of my spending from yesterday and she puts in and tells me how my spending is. And she has her personality in there. She's like this overbearing mom that just keeps me in check. So she does a daily spending summary. This is probably her most expensive thing. She also does a weekly retro where she looks at what have we done in the last week? Is there any way we can improve? This is my feedback mechanism that I'll talk about in another video. And then she reviews uncategorized transactions. And this is the every 4 hours she goes through and she reviews. Now, the reviewing uncategorized transactions, you can see I'm missing some here. And that's because I hide empty message runs because these can kind of clutter. So she will go through and she'll do like a simple fencing, and these are silent, right? There was nothing. There was no spending. There was no uncategorized transaction. There was nothing. So there's nothing to report. So we're going to hide those because it makes it easier to see what's going on. So if those are silent, I don't need to see those. But she's able to review and she's able to categorize those transactions. Now, if this is her actions, this is what she's doing. If I go to her output, so if I go to my budget, I can see where my expenses are. I can see how things are tracked, and I get a nice, pretty visual here, which is really nice. So obviously I'm not going to show you guys all my budget here, but I can track this a lot easier, which is nice. On my transactions, this is where I'll be able to see what she's done. So all of these here, where I have these tags of categories, she went through and she tagged them. So what she tagged eating out, she tagged medical, she did all of this. I didn't do this. And so it was automatically done by Kate, which is super helpful for me because that's something I don't have to think about and I don't have to do. And I am grateful for that. It makes my life a lot easier. So that is one thing that Kate does for me. And these again are just my cron jobs, right? Remember, I have one cron job that looks at my cron job table, looks at everything it needs to do. And so for Kate Money, she has a daily run in the morning that looks at my spending and says, hey, this is what you're doing for spending, or this is where you're at. This is how you're tracking for the month. And then 4 times a day, she calls that Simple Fin Sync. She looks for new transactions and she's able to categorize those automatically for me. Now, I do have things like she can error. Okay, things go wrong. Let's say I go to a restaurant and then so it gets posted or gets the pending, so it's like a pre-auth, and then it comes in later, and there is a tip on there. So the amounts are not the same. That would actually come in as 2 transactions sometimes. And those 2 transactions, I don't want to log those twice. Those are not 2 separate transactions, they're one. But the system doesn't know that. They don't know those aren't linked. So I built in a mechanism with Cursor where I can link those transactions together and I can merge them and say, this is the correct amount. So that way I'm not counting them twice in my budget. I can also, like my bank will basically give me a charge every month and then refund that charge. And so it's like a transaction thing. But it doesn't count, but they show up as transactions for me. And so I can take those and I can link them as transfers. Like it was a net out to a net in. Those don't matter. I can mark them as ignore, and those don't go into my budget. So these are part of the UI that I've built that will help me manage the budget and help it look pretty on my side so I can keep track of it. But those are all things that I have put into place to help manage my budget. So Kate takes the actions, and then I have the UI that I can see everything and I can manage. Then Cursor also built me like an Outlook page, which is like looking at all of my income, looking at my expenses, looking at if this changes, if I plan ahead for these expenses, etc. Cursor built all that for me. And I just talked about it'd be really cool to see this or look at best practices. What else should I put in here? What would be helpful for me to see? And it did all of that for me. So, really cool, really easy to see. And this is just the agent working on its own. I don't do anything for this, but I get to reap the benefits of its actions. So Kate is one of my favorites.